Welcome back to Good Afternoon here on Metro TV. My name is Winston Taki. Today we'll be discussing an issue that has to do with government proposition or intervention policies that they've stipulated to be implemented very soon. We'll be taking you through some 4 policies that they think when they really go by, it will necessarily help subvert our current situation as a country. We've seen the cedi depreciating marginally by 14.7% from the first 2 months of this year. And we've also seen inflation for 10 consecutive times at a 6-year high, increasing consistently. So these and more issues that will be breaking it down here on Good Afternoon Ghana. So let's go straight to the policy interventions that government has proposed. Yesterday we heard the Minister of Information, Opo Nkrumah, saying that these are protectionist policies, but not necessarily taking away those populist policies that government has put in place. But let's go to the screens. President Akufo-Addo approves measures to mitigate hardships in the Ghanaian economy. The first one says, Cabinet has agreed border reopening within 2 weeks. Already the borders have been closed. There's been calls by traders and businessmen saying that that is the means of making money. And we understand that Ghana already is the headquarters of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and trade among borders is what will be key element in ensuring that economies both sink in reference to making money going forward. And the second point has to do with government intends to cut salaries of appointees by up to 30%. That's really huge. As in which aspect or which area with reference to the policies is what we'll be looking at. The policy rate also was increased and announced by the Bank of Ghana yesterday to 17%. And we know that certainly this will reflect in terms of the standard of living and also the cost of borrowing going forward. Government also plans to pump 2 billion to rescue the cedi. The cedi has seen a very critical shock from the beginning of the year. The Bank of Ghana has hinted that it will certainly bring some hope in order to subvert the rate of depreciation. We've seen some policies, analysts, and also the Institute of Economic Affairs initially proposed a range of 16.7% in reference to the rates, but we've seen what the Bank of Ghana has decided to go by 250 basis points, basically 17%. And yesterday we spoke to the Association of Ghana Industries, that is the Bankers Association, who initially said it is in line and therefore they support it. But nonetheless, it will affect their profit going forward. They intend to see more default rates. People can no longer pay the amount of loan they've borrowed from banks because the rates have gone high, the interest have gone high. So they are quite scared that it will affect the operational costs going forward. But let's still look at the estimated salaries of top officials in Ghana, how much they make, and when this reduction is applied, at the end of the day, how it will look on their balance sheet. Cabinet ministers, that is the MPs, estimated to receive 16,423 Ghana cedis a month. And in application, if you apply the 20% to that, basically you're going to have 3,284 cedis, 60 pesos. So that means at the end of the month, they will be receiving just 13,138.4 Ghana cedis. Regional ministers who also are paid the same amount and will also be receiving basically 12 cedis, 12,773.6 Ghana cedis. And their deputies also are not left out. At the end of the month, they receive 14,826 Ghana cedis. If you apply the 20% to it, you end up arriving at 2,965.2 Ghana cedis. So at the end of the month, what reflects in the account is 11,860.8 Ghana cedis. That is what you have. But if you look at the budget allocation for the MMDACs, that's MMDs, one thing you realize is that they are budgeted in the 2022 budget to receive an amount of 908,406,956 Ghana cedis. And if you apply the 20%, basically they are receiving at the end of the month 7,726,007,263 Ghana cedis. So that is what they receive at the end of the month. So the potential amount to be saved when all the 20% is applied from the cabinet level to the MMDCs is you're going to receive 181,991,606.2 Ghana cedis. That is the amount of money will be saved when the cost element are applied. So the 20% reflection is what will aid what will be done. So that is what we have here at now. So if you look at what the government has been advocating for, is what all right. On your screen as of now, that is what is reflective when the 20%. Now we'll go straight to listen to some of the economic outlook, how the nation is looking now, and we'll look at some stories by how the economy is looking now with reference to the details, where we come from, where we are, and what we intend to become before the end of this year. So let's take a video to that effect.
Government, in a bid to ensure that the economy bounces back, will be cutting its expenditure. According to a leading member of the New Patriotic Party NPP, Gabi Ochwedako, already spending is down by more than 20%, with MDAs already feeling the pinch. Again, he indicates that the presidency alone has cut expenditure by over 30%. There have been several calls for government to be prudent in managing the economy. For instance, Associate Professor of the Political Science Department of the University of Ghana, Ransford Jampo, demanded a downsizing of the government. Others also want the Akufo-Addo administration to be more proactive in publicizing government measures taken to deal with the fiscal difficulties.
The president is taking some far-reaching measures and giving some clear instructions. Instructions essentially that will ensure that we stay on the budget deficit target for the year and stay on the deficit path for the next 2-3 years and ensure that the fundamentals are kept firmly in place. The finance minister is engaging with various stakeholders in the economy and who announced to the country sometime this week the details of those fiscal measures. But you can be rest assured that the president has given clear directives on what he will not compromise on. And the kind of measures that will be taken will cut from the very top right down to the bottom. And all of us hopefully can get to play a part in it.
We see the expenditure, or there are reports that, okay, X amounts or X millions of cedis has been spent on this or that. But what we do not see, or what we are very curious about, is the benefit, or how much productive benefit has come to the nation as a result of those expenses. And this is something that we unfortunately have not been able to see or recoup. And I believe that these are some of the reasons why we are in the situation where these expenditure items have to be reviewed.
Ghana's current public debt stock stands at 341.8 billion Ghana cedi, with a corresponding debt to GDP ratio of more than 77% as of September ending 2021. This implies each of the country's 30.8 million population owes approximately 11,000 Ghana cedi, if shared among them.
So last night, the Minister of Information, Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah, was on the show with on the Good Evening Ghana show, and he made mention of the fact that government will protect its flagship program, but not necessarily scrapping it off because of the cutting down in expenditure. Let's take a listen to what he said.
You cut your expenses as a father and do that because your revenues may be delaying or not coming in. Your children still want to go to school. They still want to get health care. They still want to be able to buy their books. The things that amount to what we call the human quality indicators, the development indicators, you still have to fulfill them. So the president has been very clear on the measures that should be taken to protect development, to protect growth, to protect flagship programs. And again, we have been very articulate on that, that the government will protect its flagship programs to ensure that they deliver value to the poor woman in Ofuase who is probably going to bed tonight, to the poor man somewhere whose child is benefiting from free senior high school, to that young man elsewhere who is looking to get a job in one of the One District, One Factory initiatives. The government will protect those ones. The president has been clear, protect them, ensure that they are delivered, but do all of this within a 7.4% budget deficit.
So you just saw what the Minister of Information says with regards to the agenda government intends to pursue within the short and medium term, and that they are protecting growth, they're protecting flagship programs, and all the interventions that have been stipulated intends to ensure that the economy is revived. Basically, that's going forward. We've seen the policy rate being fixed at 17%. We've also seen government's agenda to cut expenditure by 20%. But we'll speak to that effect by, joining us on phone call. We have Dr. Jerry Moffat, who hits with us with regards to, he is the External Monetary Policy Advisor with EFRAG EU, and he's on phone with us. All right.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Doc.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me too?
Yes, I can. No,
that's fantastic.
Loud and
yes.
clear. So you have heard what the minister has said with regards to the state of the economy and the agenda to revitalize the economy by ensuring that expenditure is cut down by 20%. Would that in any way make any difference, considering the fact of where we are as a nation?
It wouldn't make any difference. It would not make any difference. And the reason it wouldn't make any difference is that we seem to now be fighting inflation, but we've forgotten that before the inflation, the economy was not in good shape. Ghana was actually heading for even a default before the spark of the inflation. The inflation started somewhere just early this year, but like I said at the time, the signals were there. And there was enough information for other institutions to organize themselves. Now, there is something I would like to pick it from two angles. I'm going to look at I'll be looking at the expenditure cuts, and also looking at the central bank move to necessarily establish whether indeed this issues or this kind of resolutions would be able to revive the economy, which I absolutely think it will not. Now, one of it is that you see, the monetary structure of the Ghanaian economy is much more different. It is basically different than what happens in the United States. The reason being that in the United States, almost about 94% of money transaction in the United States is based on credit, and purely that is the use of the credit cards. We have about $53 trillion in the United States that is being used as a credit, or that is being used through credit channels to revive the economy. It's only $3 trillion cash system that we have. Now, when you come down to Ghana, the sad issue about it is that as of June 2001, the credit into the private sector and the government sector was just about 47 billion Ghanaian cedis, and that accounts for just about 38% of broad money supply into the economy. The total broad money supply into the economy was about 121 point almost 89%, 89 billion. So that is to tell you that almost about 74.5 billion of cash is not linked up to interest rate. These are people who probably might not be dealing with bank or be working with fiscal cash. So therefore, if you raise a policy rate, it will not have enough effect. Its effect would not be so reasonable enough to make sure that you even tame inflation. That is the first thing. But it has an adverse cost. The adverse effects on the economy is very high. It doesn't seem like growth. It seems like the adverse effect would weaken the banking system and the financial system.
Dr. Jerry, if you could hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
You said it will not make any difference, but before the announcement, we saw the CD depreciate marginally from 8 CD to around 7 CD, 21 pesos. Is that not enough difference based on the announcement, or breaking down the stipulation or on the speculation on the market?
No, that is not about a speculation in the market, because raising a policy rate up, taking an immediate effect, certainly is a bit more suspicious. There is much more issues underlying that than that. The second aspect of it that you might even have to look at is that, you see, we're going to have a higher funding cost against the banks. It means that the banks would have to borrow at a much more higher cost to be able to run the operations. The second aspect of it, which will be a disaster to the banks, will be that the fixed income investment of the banks are certainly going to be worthless. Because when we talk about fixed income, we're talking about a situation whereby the banks might have invested with other institutions at a fixed rate that they would have to pick. So now that the policy rate has gone up, it certainly means that it's going to discount most of this investment they have done. So the fixed income investment by the banks is also going to go down. And there is likely to be much more lower demand for loan, and thereby weakening the profitability of the banks. That is one other key area. Now, the fourth area would also be that there will be deterioration in the loan quality of the banks. What is going to mean is that we're going to have NPL, non-performing loans, also going up because of the hike in the policy rate, which will certainly be translated into an interest rate to those who have borrowed. That the fifth aspect of it is that the banks are likely to shift to a lower risk asset by reducing the fee income and then probably, focusing or stifling the credit transmission, which is supposed to go into the economy to revive the economy. And once the financial transmission mechanism is going to have a problem, that is the banking sector is going to have a problem, we should not be anticipating any recovery, neither now or whatever it might be.
All right, Dr. Manfat.
Yes.
Now, based on data from the Bank of Ghana yesterday, it is reported that the banking sector within the first 2 months, that is January, February, recorded a tune of 3.1 billion in profit. Is that not a good suggestion that some of the policies being put in place are taking effect on the industry?
Was it before this policy rate was announced? If it is not, because before then, the policy rate was for 14.5. As we said now, the policy rate is 17.5. And then possibly adding 2.5 is too much of a heavy lifting. Despite the fact that we're talking about inflation, we are looking at it that this is not a domestic inflation. These are imported inflation. And if you're having an imported inflation, and you therefore have about almost 62% of your broad money supply into a free floating cash into the system, which is not through link up to credit, neither does it link up to interest rate. How can you convince me that indeed the policy rate hikes has a potential of necessarily taming inflation? It is much more suspicious and unbelievable. Now, the third aspect of it has got to do with cutting down expenditure.
Dr. Manfat, before you get to the expenditure bit,
Sure.
Before you get to the expenditure bit, you made mention of the fact that we are operating an imported inflation. So how do we deal with that?
Very good. How to deal with that? Let me tell you. The current structure that was even recently be adopted by the United States, that has even got a very foothold on their credit system. What they did was that they would have to invite the key industry holders or the key industries that runs within their country. And they invited almost about 16 top CEOs who are based in the United States. Now, what they have to do is that you have to look at how to stabilize and subsidize most of their production. I kept on saying that we have a basket that lead and drive inflation. And one of the components or one of the items in the basket is the fuel prices, because once fuel prices are increased, a lot of other factors also increases. We would then look at rent. So we have what we call the consumer pricing index. And this consumer pricing index has got to do with, we have so many levers that actually drives inflation. What we need to do is to get this inflation driving mechanism, we bring them forth. Once we bring them forth, we can decide with them. Government can decide to tell me that, or government can decide to tell them that, look, we want to subsidize your production up to this level. And we intend to tame the volatility of the price, rising high from now to this level. So therefore, we're trying to subsidize it. We also decide that, one, we may have to take off taxes. Some of the taxes are actually one of those that fuel price increases. If we are able to do this and you subsidize this, and then you tell me that now you are increasing the policy rate, it makes a lot of sense. That is to mean that the huge chunk of money that is not linked up to interest rate and does not link up to policy rate will therefore have a measure to be able to be tamed. But if you don't go through that option and you are using only monetary policy tools, trust me, it is not going to be impactful.
Okay.
And nothing that we can gain out of it.
All right. Dr. Jerry, first, you've said the policy rate increase will not necessarily make any change or bring any difference because we are operating an imported inflation. But will the injection of the $2 billion dollars into the system to protect the city, as they put it, make any difference as well?
The problem that we're going to have is that, you see, as of this year, the government was expecting to float up bonds. Government could not because Ghana has been kicked out from the capital market. And because Ghana has been kicked out from the capital market, the position that we have now is that interest rate accruing on most of the loans that Ghana have contracted means that we will need dollars to be able to pay off this interest rate. So if we raise up in foreign currency, it will go back immediately because of the accruing debt that we have. And that would make the stability much more jittery and not stable. So therefore, if the government even raised $2 billion today, I can assure you that that would not be stable because we have accrued interest rate to pay. And because that is an external funding, the payment would have to be done in dollars. And that is putting more pressure on the government than the trade transaction that we've been doing. So the inflation, the spiking of inflation, it is not mainly based on the trade transaction, but it's also based on the government demand for dollars to be able to pay for accruing interest rate. That is one of the positions, and that's where we are. And that's the reason why I feel like if you even receive $2 billion, it will not be enough. Because the first thing is that we have to look at your loan portfolio. And if we look at your loan portfolio, we have to look at your accrual pattern, or we have to look at the liability accrued patterns. If we tend to realize that either this month or next month, we are likely to pay interest, there is a possibility that our reserves would not be enough. Okay. And as I was saying, beginning of the year, I did analysis and I did a risk assessment of the Ghanaian economy. What we did realize is that we're likely to run 4.7%, almost a negative on our reserves in the dollar currency due to a lot of liabilities that we have to pay. So as I'm saying, the $2 billion could come in, but if we are having a lot of liabilities to pay outside the country due to our own borrowings, it means that it will not suffice, and that will not tame the inflation, and that will not necessarily make our condition better.
Okay. Dr. Jerry,
yes,
we most of the policies being intervention policies being called on by government. Basically, let's come to the expenditure aspect. Okay. Our debt to GDP ratio seems not to be quite a good one, but the government has suggested that they intend to stay within the threshold of 7% this time round, with the case of cutting 20% of expenditure as well. How do we put this in perspective going forward?
All right, good. Now, you see, this is one thing I was talking about. We seem to have left the major economic trouble, and we are just handling the inflation that just came in, and that is where our problem is. Our economy was struggling before the inflation. The inflation was just as the hikes was actually initiated by Fed of the United States, and certainly that affected most of the emerging economies, including Ghana. Now, the major trouble that we have before then was that the economy was struggling. The economy was not doing well before then. So what the government, including its own government policy, if the government is not a bit contradictory on its own policy, the government announced about 100 billion Ghanaian cedis over a period of time to inject it into the economy to make sure the economy revives. Indeed, this is the way the economy works. Once the government spends, it allows individuals also spend because that pushes up money into the economy. And once it pushes up money into the economy spends, and then maybe you could see some level of recovery. Now, as we are, if the government have to cut down expenditure, and the expenditure are very critical expenditures, or the expenditure could spur spending to enable economic growth, and you cut it off, and you go ahead and then increase policy rate at the same measure, which is okay because the central bank, or what is the monetary system and the fiscal, have to work in concert in achieving a particular goal and objective. That's correct. But however, looking at the economic condition in which we are before even the inflation spikes, if you are cutting down expenditure and increasing policy rate hikes, what you're going to do is that economic growth is going to slow down. You're going to have a slow economy. And if you're not very careful, you will strangle the economy at the same time. So out of firefighting and out of frustration, government is implementing policies that policy might possibly come back and bite the Ghanaian economy and make the Ghanaian economy much more worse than we even started from. So if the Minister of Information made us to understand that indeed we want to cut down the policy rate, we want to cut down expenditure and grow the economy, it doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't
Jerry,
sound economically.
you've spoken
Yes.
at length on the expenditure aspect. How about the revenue? Are we doing well in that aspect? And also, the case of e-levy, which is estimated to give us 6 billion annually, would also shore us in the bid, because the whole conversation is whether this will push us back to the IMF. Even if it does, would it be a good reflection going forward to outside investors, foreign investors in the long run?
Okay, this is a very good question that you've actually asked. You see, that was in 2019. I predicted the situation we're going to go through, and the prediction that I had was that the government made a mistake. They made a fundamental mistake, and I strongly believe that the central bank should take the blame. The reason the central bank should take the blame on the revenue side has got to do with the collapse of the banking sector, or the banking businesses that were actually collapsed. The major problem that we had as of that time was that the situation that was prevailing within the banking sector, they were actually what we call a systemic problem. They were not a typical banking or financial crisis. A typical financial crisis is a situation where we could have seen that there is a run on the banks and that people are breaking in and so on and so forth. But much of the situation that we had was purely behavioral. Looking at their own recommendations, what they wrote, it was purely behavioral. And when it is systemic, you don't necessarily revoke licenses. Once you revoke licenses, it affects the entire economy. Look at the government holding up people's deposit for a period of almost 2 years. What do you think would happen to the economy? Because indeed, that funds of 21 billion could have had a major multiplier effect on the economy. And that could have necessarily boosted up the government revenue base. As we are speaking now, the rippling effect of the banking sector crisis is what the country is facing at the moment, and as we speak, as we talk now. Now, you realize that the revenues are not coming because most of the businesses that were started by then had almost all collapsed. Businesses has been locked down. And for that matter, and businesses that are also surviving, very few of them are making profits. So therefore, your revenue base, the bottom line will be down to businesses. And if the bottom line is down, your revenue base will be down.
Okay.
And once the revenue base is down, the government will have nothing.
All right.
Now, coming
Dr.
down
Jerry?
to the e-levy, I'm coming. Now, coming down to the e-levy.
Dr. Jerry.
Yes, I can hear you.
Jerry, you've made quite a very critical point this afternoon here. We are most grateful for your time.
Thank you.
We'll certainly be reaching out on subsequent conversations. Yeah, thank you.
Most grateful.
Yeah, Dr. Jerry Montfort is the external monetary policy advisor with AFRAG and EU, and he's taken us through what he thinks the economy stands at. He says that the systemic problem that was facing the banking sector necessarily does not need it totally being collapsed.